Texas softball and baseball are in full swing, while a disaster in Lawrence leaves Texas men's basketball searching for answers, and the Texas women's team continues to string together wins. All this and more coming up on College Press Box.
Good evening and welcome to College Press Box. I'm your host, Henry Hipschman, and he's Justin Gooseman, and we have a great show for you this evening.
But first, a quick reminder before we get started. We are sponsored by Cap Metro, Austin's very own regional public transportation provider, connecting you to work, school, play, and more. Find your ride this weekend's game at capmetro.org. Basketball took a trip up to Lawrence, Kansas in hopes to get a big road win to buff up their resume on Saturday, but those hopes would be short-lived after a rough game on all fronts from Rodney Terry's squad. Let's get to the highlights and take a look at how it all went down. Starting off the game, Texas got off to a rough start. It was 8-2 early, but Dylan DeSue trying to assert his strength on the defensive end with a big block. On the other hand, Brock Cunningham dishes the nice pass into Max Aves for the layup, but Kansas was simply rolling all night long. Hunter Dickinson down low, and he had a masterful game with 20 points, almost all coming from inside the paint. And there goes Johnny Furphy with the dunk, showing that white men can jump. Indeed they can. Kansas wasn't done quite yet. They find the Nicholas Timberlake in the corner for the three, and Kansas continues to get on fire. Dylan DeSue loses the ball on the other end, down 8, and DeJuan Harris finds Timberlake one more time for the big slam on DeSue. Kansas would take a 10-point lead with 8 minutes remaining in the first half. Take another look. DeJuan Harris with the steal, easy lob, and Timberlake with the jam and with authority. On the other hand, Dylan Mitchell does the same with an alley-oop from Max Asmus, but it just wasn't clean. Even the good things for Texas did not look good all night long. Towards the end of the first half, there goes Marco Jackson with the behind-the-back dish to Hunter Dickinson. Take another look at that sweet dime right behind the back, down low. Easy bucket for Dickinson. Kansas just could not be stopped. The defense was not there from the Longhorns. Opening up the second half, Dickinson got to work right away, making the lead a 22-point ball game, and Texas just couldn't recover. Kansas would have good ball movement the rest of the game. Again, Texas's defense wasn't there. Shot 41% from the field to Kansas's 61%. With March Madness quickly approaching, we're now joined by TSTV's own Aram Vela. I like to call him a professional hater, but he's going to give you some insight into men's basketball. Aram, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Goose. It's great to be back in the studio.
It's that time of year again, and we are just days away from March. College basketball fans know what that means. It won't be long before we are all filling out brackets. Teams' tournament resumes are, for the most part, already built, except for conference tournament play. As we look ahead to the Final Four in Phoenix, which 4 teams do you believe have the best shot of winning the whole thing in March?
You know, Goose, March is truly the best time of year, at least for college basketball fans. And the way I look at this, I'm not going to pick the 4 best teams on paper. You know, March, it's a gauntlet. It's very unpredictable, and there's a lot of factors more than talent that go into a Final Four run. It all comes down at the end of the day to who has the best month of March. And for me, I'm going to start off with the Arizona Wildcats. Now, don't let this team's record fool you. At 21-6, they have many quality wins, but they also have some very questionable losses. But they're much better than that record suggests, as they have impressive wins over Duke and Alabama. Arizona is one of those teams who can blow you out one night and they can lose the next game in embarrassing fashion. But I predict by March, Arizona will find the right balance to come tournament time. They have a clear path to winning a weak Pac-12 division, and they have veteran players such as Caleb Love, Pelle Larson, and Umar Ballo, who have been in these moments before. I like the Wildcats to go on a tear in March. And another team, I already mentioned them, that I expect to make a run is the Duke Blue Devils. I promise that's no bias. Like Arizona, they are a lot better than their record suggests, but they are loaded with talent. They have what I believe to be is one of the best starting 5s in the country with Roach, Proctor, McCain, Mitchell, and Filipowski. And just like last year, we saw the story last year. The young Blue Devils struggled to start the season at 5-3, but since then they've gone 16-3. In those games, the Blue Devils have not logged a single double-digit digit loss, which speaks volumes compared to last year's team. And just like last year, I expect this team to pick up steam towards the end of the year. They can score in a multitude of ways, and when everybody is on and they're defending, they're going to be tough to beat. And, you know, I think another year of experience for the group of sophomores with Filipowski, Mitchell, and Proctor. This team's not going to go out in the round of 32 like they did last year. Now, I'm not going to say they're going to be a 1 seed, but I still expect them to make a deep run. The sky's the limit for John Shire's young team, and before I get into my next one, let's just get the obvious out of the way. The reigning national champions, UConn, they have to be up there as well. They did have a pretty bad loss versus Creighton last week, but still, this is the unanimous, well, maybe not unanimous, but we're going to talk about a team that has another claim to that throne in a minute. But for now, they're the number 1 team. They're the number 1 seed in all the land. At 25-3, they have 5 players averaging double figures. It just seems like they're just coasting through the season at this point. They are going to be very competitive this March, and I think that solidifies their status as a true blue blood school. Their core of Trish Newton, Cam Spencer, Donovan Klingon, Stefan Castle, and Alex Caravan. It's probably the best starting unit in the country. They should have no problem winning the Big East, and they should make a run towards the Final Four like it's nothing. All right, now that the boring stuff is out of the way, I'm going to go for a sleeper team. I'm going to cap it off with the Iowa State Cyclones. Now, this is a team that somehow always seems to find themselves a spot in the dance no matter what their record is. You can't count them out. This year, however, they actually look to be legitimate contenders. Coach Otzelberger has a top 10 defense as the Cyclones allow just 62.9 points per game, which is 8th best in the nation, as well as a defensive rating of 91.3, which is good for 4th best in the country. This is a gritty team that plays in close games, and these kids are used to the pressure and the moments that March is all about. It's a smart, well-coached veteran team, and those factors seem to bode well in March, and I would not be surprised to see Iowa State, as well as all these other teams, compete come April.
Yeah, I think those are all really good picks. Hopefully Kyle Filipowski is okay after the court storming incident. But now that we've got that out of the way, let's switch the gears and talk about pretenders. Every year there's a top 5 team we continually hype up week in and week out just for them to get bounced in the first or second round by a school from the middle of nowhere, breaking millions of brackets, and it's an inevitable occurrence. Who do you believe are the pretenders this year?
You know, Goose, it's easy to kick somebody when they're down, but that's exactly what I'm about to do. Purdue, I'm talking about you. Listen, I know if you're a Purdue fan, you're probably getting sick and tired of us commenting on everything you do. You're getting sick and tired of all the teasing that's been going on, especially after what happened last year. But let's talk about it for a second. Let's start with their star player, Zach Edey. Luckily, this is his last year on campus. I've seen way too many games with him in it. And in all jokes aside, in modern basketball, it's really tough to have a championship caliber team with a traditional paint-lurking big man as the focal point of your team, more or less your offense. It's great during the regular season. As you've seen, Purdue's been a really good regular season team throughout the last couple years, but come tournament time, I think Zach Edey's just going to become neutralized. It takes a lot more than height to win during March. As for his supporting cast, I don't really see it clear co-star. There's plenty of solid players such as Lance Jones, Braden Smith, and Mason Gillis, but let's face it, none of these guys are ever going to touch an NBA basketball court. I see no one on this roster that's going to step up for the Boilermakers when Edey's getting quadruple teamed. And as for the defense, Purdue ranks towards the bottom half of the nation. They allow 70 points per game, which is 115th in the country, and their defensive rating is 99.3, which is 84th in the nation. They don't have a definitive defensive stopper to guard their other players' best team. Their perimeter defense is average at best, and while Edey does average 2.3 blocks per game, I foresee him having foul trouble in March. So let's recap so far. A team that's built around a 7'4" cone, a bunch of role players as a supporting cast, and a team that has no defensive discipline, no identity. And you know, Goose, I'd be willing to look past all of that, throw that all under the carpet, if only Purdue wasn't known as notorious tournament chokers. Let's pull out the receipts. In 2021, the round of 64 versus North Texas as a 4 seed, they lost that one. 2022 Sweet 16 against a 15 seed St. Peter's as a 3 seed, they lost that one. Last year, round of 64, they were a number 1 seed. I believe they were the number 1 overall seed in the entire tournament, lost to 15 seed Fairleigh Dickinson. What more really needs to be said at this point? I don't really expect anything less from the Boilermakers this year. The end of the Zach Edey era will happen this March, in my opinion, which I think it will be better for the program, as they can look forward to actually developing players rather than having their game plan be to give the ball to the 7'4" guy 3 inches away from the rim.
Those are all good points. Last time a 16 seed knocked off a #1 seed, though, Virginia did come back the next year and win the championship. We'll see if Purdue can do something similar, but totally different makeups. Let's shift our focus back to the 40 acres and the Longhorns team. After a crushing 86-67 loss on Saturday to Kansas, the Longhorns sit at just 17-10 on the season and have a losing record in conference play at 6-8, which is good for 9th in the Big 12. With conference tournaments around the corner, what does Texas's resume look like, and what do they need to do to make it 4 straight tournament appearances and possibly escape those first 4 out?
Well, yeah, Goose, needless to say, this team has lived up to their number 18 preseason ranking. You know, this was a team that we all saw last year could have and should have made the Final Four. And despite losing most of their starters last year, this team was really expected to be, somewhat competitive this year. And as far as the NCAA tournament goes, I'm not even going to lie, the Longhorns have some major work to do if they even want to be considered a bubble team. This is a team with double-digit losses on the season already, a losing conference record, and 2 ranked opponents in Texas Tech and Baylor in their remaining schedule. The Longhorns' issues stem from iffy at best perimeter defense and really soft play from their big men. They aren't particularly good at any statistical category, and last year's team, while they tended to dig themselves in deep holes in the first half, thrived in close games and closing them out, whereas this year's team just seems to be a middle-of-the-pack team in a gauntlet of a conference. They would have to win out in the regular season, in my opinion, and make a run in the Big 12 tournament. See, if they win out, they'll still be 21-10 and 10-8 conference record. And like I said before, they would have to make a deep run in the Big 12 tournament to be even considered as a tournament team. That's actually one aspect that I do have going for them, is playing in the Big 12. As last year, 6 teams made the big dance, including a 19-4 Iowa State team. We were talking about them earlier. These last stretch of games are going to be crucial to the Longhorns' tournament chances because as of right now, they're not in. But let's take a look at the bigger picture. This is a team that should have been in the Final Four last year, and when Rodney Terry was made the head coach in the offseason, there was hopes that there would be much more of the same, and in his first true year as head coach of the Longhorns, he hasn't lived up to the Texas standard. Listen, when you're a coach at Texas, it doesn't matter if it's basketball, football, volleyball, fishing, for all that matter. You're expected to lead a competitive program. Now, I'm not calling him for his job. I'm not calling for him to be sacked, but rather fans should expect better next year. Next year, it shouldn't even be a question if the Horns would be in the tournament. Now, if next year reflects more of what we saw this season, then questions will have to be asked. But a full offseason of recruiting, rebuilding, retooling, and reloading should do this team wonders after a disappointing season thus far.
That's very true. Next year they'll be in the SEC, a little bit of a weaker basketball conference, but they're going to have to do better next year, and hopefully they can make a run to get into the tournament this year. When we come back, we're going to have Georgie Ruiz joining us to break down Texas women's basketball team, who just moved up to number 3 in the rankings. You won't want to miss it.
Welcome back in the College Press Box, where we're going to talk some women's basketball. Here to talk about it with us is Georgie Ruiz. How are we doing, Georgie?
Great. Good to have me here. It's been an exciting year for women's basketball. I'm excited to get into it.
Awesome. As March approaches for women's basketball, these women have been dominating the scene and making history, with Caitlin Clark breaking the all-time scoring record, but Iowa falling short to number 14 Indiana, and there's no question this is just a sneak peek into what March has in store. Who do you think are the teams to beat, and who do you think could surprise us in the end?
I mean, these women have been working really hard this season, and many have shined and many have prevailed, but some have barely prevailed. Last week, I would have had Iowa in my top 4, but after this weekend, my whole bracket changed. At the end of the day, it comes down to not what you did during all season, but what you do in the postseason. I have some teams in my sights that I believe would do really good if they keep up the momentum they have right now. I'm a big believer in bracketology and have high hopes for these teams. Stick with me now. So the Ohio State Buckeyes are riding a remarkable 13-win game streak, propelling them into the coveted number 2 spot at the AP poll. J.C. Sheldon's impactful return combined with the standout performances from players like Cody McMahon and positioned them as strong contenders for a deep run. Notably, their robust defense, averaging over 20 turnovers per game, have been a pivotal factor in their recent success. Another team to pay attention to is the Virginia Tech Hokies. They're on a captivating 9-game win streak, reminiscent of their spectacular run to the Final Four in the previous year. They are ranked number 5 in the AP polls and hold the number 3 seed line in bracketology. They boast standout players in Elizabeth Kisley and Georgia Edmore. The team's successes hinge on the development of the complementary players such as Matilda Aiken, as they aim for another deep March run. Another team not to forget is the LSU Tigers. They are defending national championship. Give me 1 second. Sorry, I got so bright. Another team not to forget is the LSU's Tigers. They are defending national champions after all. They re-entered the AP polls top 10, coming in at number 9 after these ladies have come after a really rough patch, but recently won against Tennessee at Thompson's Bowling Arena. Haley Van Lient recorded a season-high 26 points as she led the team to their victory over the Lady Vols. I have high hopes for this ladies if they can work together as a team. Lately, it seemed like these players have been playing a little too independent. I mean, they're all skilled players on their own, but they need to come together to make it happen. But we all know the power of Kim Muckley and her coaching abilities, and the way she can get these girls back on track is very impressive. Now, this last team, call me biased, but my top pick is our women's Texas basketball team. These girls hold a lot of promise with how you've been performing at home and away. We have freshmen like Madison Booker making headlines as the top scorer, and individually these girls are good, but when they come together, they're a unit. And just wait till Book cooks. Oof, it gets fiery in there.
Speaking of Texas, the Texas and Oklahoma rivalry is coming back to Norman. The last time they faced each other, Texas could not pull off a win at home. But with Texas coming off a 9-game win streak and a win on the road, how do you feel they will match up against Oklahoma at Norman?
Okay, well, both Oklahoma and Texas are considered contenders for the Big 12 Conference crown, and both teams have showcased a solid season with notable wins and standout performances from key players. Texas is 1 win away from getting that top spot in the Big 12 in their last matchup at home. Texas couldn't pull off a win against Oklahoma, with the score being 87-91. These girls gained ignition in the fourth quarter to close the gap, but it was simply not enough to win. That game was a little painful. But however, that was in the past, and these women have really transformed themselves from here to now and became a team to beat. Coming off of an 8-game streak after beating UCF, and they have never looked better with their teamwork on and off the court. We all know when they are on fire, Texas women are hard to stop. And their matchup against UCF on the road was successful, as some lead scorers like Madison Booker with 22 points and 5 assists, and Shaylee Gonzalez with a remarkable effort on defense with 5 rebounds, 2 steals, and 3 drawn offensive fouls. These ladies shine, but as they come together, their skills bounce off each other and they dominate on the court. However, we do have to take a look at Oklahoma's lead scorers. Skylar Van had 17 points and 11 rebounds for Oklahoma against their rival Oklahoma State this past week, while her teammate Peyton Verhurst added 14 points and 13 rebounds with 5 assists. But the real threat is freshman Sahara Williams, who scored 20 points in the second half to boast a 91-56 victory. She scored 10 points in the first 3 minutes of the second half. I mean, you see it everywhere. Once you get the momentum, it's hard to stop. And with the Sooners hosting at home, it's all about who can come up on top. And recently, these girls are really good, especially on away games, so just hope they keep the momentum up.
Sounds like it's high hopes for the Longhorns. These women have been making waves with their recent number 3 ranking in the AP polls. How do you think this will turn out coming March Madness, and how important do you think their chemistry is when taking them as far as Final Four?
Well, like you said, these women are ranked number 3 for the first time since November of 22, and they're shooting at an impressive 26-33 record and all eyes are on them to see how they'll fare in the tournament. Going in the first round, I predict that we will be a top seed and be able to play with the confident energy to start it off right. We know last year was a hard tournament for all the girls, as they were eliminated the second round after suffering a 73-51 loss against the Louisville Cardinals. However, in that matchup, there was no communication or energy from the start, and the Cardinals fed in on that. But now it's completely different from these ladies. Like I said before, and I'll say it again and again, these girls are a team to watch. Their Their chemistry on the court will be absolutely crucial if they want to go far, especially when they face off against heavyweight like Ohio State, ranked at number 2 with a solid record of 24-3. But the real test, that's going to come from South Carolina, the undefeated Jaggernauts sitting at number 1 with a perfect 27-0 score. We can handle the pressure going into it, and we would be on the South Carolina territory in the final moments, and it would all come down to that. But our ladies are prepared. As we mentioned, these girls' stats have been off the charts, and so while Texas' ranking and record have certainly put them on the map, their ability to keep up that chemistry will be key factor as they aim for the Final Four. And these ladies are killing their season right now, and it does make me happy to see more attention and more students going to these games and giving the girls these energy, because they feed off it, and it makes for an interesting game. I look forward to our senior night against BYU and Vic Schaefer's birthday. It should be a good game and an amp to carry them into a tournament. It's going to be one heck of a ride, and I'll be watching all step of the way.
All right, thank you so much for joining us. When we come back to College Press Box, Gabriel Silva will break down the last week of Longhorn softball. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to College Press Box. Joining us now to recap this past week for Texas softball is Gabriel Silva. Gabriel, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now let's get right into it. How did Texas softball do after a great slate of games throughout this week?
Well, to start off the week, Texas softball took on the Houston Christian Huskies on Wednesday. Texas took care of the Huskies with an explosive third-run inning that included 10 runs on 8 hits to give them a 14-1 run rule victory in 5 innings. The next opportunity in the diamond for the Longhorns would be in the Lone Star State Invitational. Texas would take on the Louisiana Raging Cajuns to begin the tournament on Friday, and they easily took care of them with a score of 5-0, and a gem pitched by freshman Tegan Cavan, who went 7 innings and only gave up 2 hits. The next game for the Longhorns would happen later in the day, as it would go against the Colorado State Rams. Mac Morgan and Sophia Simpson would combine for another shutout in the circle for the Longhorns. The offense was highlighted by a 2-home run and 3 RBI night for Reese Atwood, en route to a 7-0 win to move the Longhorns to 10-0 on the season. Saturday, the Longhorns took on Colorado State, and it was almost a mirror of the matchup from the day prior. Tegan Cavan threw 4 innings and only gave up 1 hit, and Estelle Check closed out the game with an inning in relief. On the offensive side, Reese Atwood's grand slam in the 4th inning capped off a 6-run outburst and helped push them towards a 9-0 victory. The nightcap for Saturday was another ranked matchup for the Longhorns as they took on the number 12 Stanford Cardinal. After beating them 9-2 last weekend, this matchup would not go as good for the Longhorns. They suddenly found themselves down 2-0 after a mistake-ridden beginning to the game. Stanford would have some mistakes of their own, as a drop ball at first allowed Bella Dayton to score to cut the lead to 2-1. A couple of innings later, Texas found themselves down 3-1, when, you guessed it, Reese Atwood would yet again deliver a home run to tie the game. But that would be all for the offensive production, as Texas would not score for the rest of the game, and Stanford would snatch a victory in extra innings with a score of 4-3. The Cardinal handed Texas their first loss of the season and ended their 11-game win streak. Sunday, Texas would have its first chance at rebounding after a loss, and they would take on the Raging Cajuns again. A slow start for Mac Morgan put the Longhorns in a 4-0 deficit, but she was able to bounce back and get through 4 innings before Citlali Gutierrez was able to come in and get through the next 2 innings. And within those first 2 innings, Texas was able to tie the game and then take the lead in the 4th inning. Texas kept a 1-run lead into the 7th when it was tea time yet again, as Tegan Cavan came in and shut down the Raging Cajuns to give Texas another victory to go 4-1 on the weekend and move to 12-1 on the season, heading into their midweek matchup against Texas State in San Marcos on Wednesday.
Currently, the softball team stands at 4-1 against ranked opponents, and I want to know what has led to this success against really formidable teams.
Well, up to this point, one of the key elements for the team has been the pitching staff. They have been lights out and have kept opponents' offenses in check. They only gave up 8 runs in their 11-game win streak to start the season. In their lone loss of the season against Stanford, they only gave up 1 earned run as the rest was unearned. Even in Sunday's matchup, after Mac Morgan's slow start, they were able to string zeros across the board to finish the game. Tegan Cavan has been lights out for the Longhorns, and as a freshman, she's been able to adapt to the level of play, and she's looking like an ace in the making for the Longhorns. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Texas's offense has been able to provide some well-needed run support for the pitching staff, and altogether it really just seems to blend really well. And it has been a key point in the reason why the Longhorns are the #2 team in the nation right now. Also, a really big reason is sophomore catcher Reese Atwood, who continued her reign of terror this past week as she had 5 home runs, 11 hits, and 16 runs batted in. She is already halfway to the Texas single-season home run record with 9, and the season only started just a couple weeks ago. These factors have led to the early season success, and it will be interesting to see if they can keep up the momentum and hopefully continue to build up after the tough loss to Stanford.
Looking ahead, how do we expect Texas softball to continue this success throughout the rest of the season?
The next month for Texas softball relatively looks pretty easy. Their only tough matchups in the month of March are a couple of midweek games against number 6 LSU and number 12 Florida State. Outside of those games, the rest of March doesn't look too bad, with a couple of series against Houston, BYU, and UCF, who are all currently unranked as they begin conference play. At the end of March and into April, they'll have to face number 7 Oklahoma State and the 3-time defending national champions and number 1 ranked Oklahoma Sooners. These 2 series will be critical in Texas's run to become one of the best in the country. After that, they won't face another currently ranked opponent for the rest of the season, and depending on how the rest of the season plays out, they could be contending for a conference championship or even a national championship at the end of the season.
Yeah, you brought up that Oklahoma series. It seems like year in and year out, Oklahoma is just a powerhouse in softball. But thanks for that, Graybuel. When we return, we'll recap the past week in Longhorn sports. We'll be right back. You won't want to miss it. Welcome back to College Press Box. Now, let's take a quick look back at this past week in Longhorn sports. First off, Texas baseball completed a full series shutout this Sunday against Cal Poly. The series shutout is Texas's first since all the way back in 2002 when they did it versus UT Pan American.
Next, we'll talk about 4th-ranked Texas women's tennis fell 4-3 to 3rd-ranked Stanford on Friday. It came down to the final match where Texas fell in a 3-set heartbreaker. Texas will begin Big 12 play on March 3rd, where they'll take on rival Oklahoma.
And lastly, the 7th-ranked Texas women's track and field team clinched a Big 12 title on Saturday, accruing a total of 135 points and claiming their 9th indoor championship in just the last 10 seasons.
Now we'll take a look ahead to this week in Longhorn sports. On Tuesday, baseball is taken on St. John's at 6:30 p.m. and that will be shown on the Longhorn Network. Men's basketball is going to Texas Tech at 8 p.m. and that will be shown at ESPN. Wednesday, softball is at Texas Tech 6 p.m. on Longhorn Network, and women's basketball is at OU 6 p.m. on ESPN+. And then the week will finish on Friday with softball at Longhorn. Softball at the Longhorn Invitational. So on Friday, baseball takes on LSU at 7 p.m. and that will be announced where that will be shown. Saturday, men's basketball will take on Oklahoma State at 1 p.m. on ESPN2. Baseball versus Texas State at 3 p.m., which will also be announced where that will be shown. Women's basketball will take on BYU 7 p.m. on Longhorn Network. And Sunday, baseball versus Vanderbilt at 11 a.m. and that will also be announced where that will be shown.
And that'll do it for this week's episode of College Press Box. Thank you for everybody for tuning in, and thank you to everyone in our back room, including our executive producer, Jason Conander, as this show is not possible without the hard work put in behind the scenes week in and week out. Don't forget to tune in to our other shows this week, like College Crossfire on Wednesday at 9 and 1-0 Sports on Friday at 10. That's it for me. I'm Justin Gooseman, and he's Henry Hipschman from TSTV Sports. Have a great night.